My name is Chantel Brown, and I'm 34 years old. For the last few years, I've been living the quiet life of a single mother outside of Columbus, Ohio, working from a desk in my spare bedroom while raising my two girls, Zara and Nova. Before all of this happened, I didn't have much room for God. I wasn't a bad person, but I saw religion as something people used when they couldn't handle reality on their own. I thought the Bible was a collection of old stories, and the church was a place for people who liked to judge their neighbors. I relied on myself, my paycheck, and my own strength to keep my world spinning. I didn't need a savior. I needed a faster internet connection and a bigger savings account. Most of my days were spent in a cycle of emails, laundry, and making sure the girls had what they needed for school. I was proud of that, proud that I didn't need anyone to lean on. I looked at people who prayed like they were looking for a way to hide from the hard truths of life. To me, faith was something people leaned on when they didn't have a plan. I had a plan, I had a budget, I had a schedule. I thought that was enough to protect us from anything the world could throw our way. But my reality shattered 4 days ago, on February 9th, 2026. It was a Monday morning, just after I'd sent the girls off to school. I remember the house felt particularly quiet, that peaceful stillness that comes after the morning rush of finding shoes and packing lunchboxes. I was in the kitchen making a second pot of coffee before starting my work calls. I smelled something, a faint sulfur-like scent, but it was so subtle I thought maybe the trash needed to go out. I didn't realize that a pipe in the wall had been slowly failing for days, filling the space behind my stove with silent danger. Before I could even register the threat, I reached for the stove to boil water for my French press. The spark from the igniter met a pocket of leaked natural gas. The world didn't just explode, it vanished into a roar of orange and white. There was no pain at first, just a massive, slamming weight that threw me backward, and then everything went black. One moment I was Chantel Brown, worrying about a meeting at noon and wondering if I should buy the girls new sneakers for the spring, and the next, I was looking down at my kitchen from the ceiling. It was the strangest feeling, seeing the world from that angle. I saw the cabinets shredded, the windows blown out into the yard, and my own body slumped against the refrigerator. My clothes were smoldering. I saw the neighbors running toward the house, their mouths open in shouts I couldn't hear. I felt no pain, no fear for my life, and no attachment to the person lying on the floor. I felt a strange, heavy silence, like being underwater but being able to breathe perfectly. The chaos below felt distant, like a movie playing on a screen with the volume turned off. Then a light began to pull me. It wasn't a terrifying light. It was more like the morning sun through a bedroom window on a Saturday, warm and beckoning me to wake up from a long, confusing dream. When I stepped into that light, I wasn't alone. Jesus was there. He didn't look like a painting or a statue. He looked real, strong, with hands that looked like they had known hard work, and eyes that held the weight of every star in the sky. I want to tell you about his eyes. They were a deep, dark brown, and they looked through me as if I were made of glass. When he looked at me, I felt a shame so deep it nearly broke me, because in a single heartbeat, I realized how much time I'd wasted being proud of my own independence. I saw every time I had rolled my eyes at a believer, every time I had chosen my own comfort over a neighbor in need, and every moment I had lived as if I were the center of the universe. I felt small, like a single grain of sand. But he didn't turn away. He walked toward me, and the love radiating from him was like a physical heat, melting away every fear I'd ever had. It was like being wrapped in a blanket that had been warming by a fire. "Chantel," he said. His voice was like a deep, resonant bell that vibrated in my very bones. It wasn't just a sound, it was a feeling. It felt like every good memory I'd ever had was wrapped up in that one word. "My daughter, you have spent your life keeping the lights on for those two little ones. You thought you were just surviving, just paying bills, but you were tending the lamps I gave you. You were the warmth in their winter and the light in their darkness. That was your ministry." I fell to my knees sobbing. These weren't the tears of a mother who had just lost her home. They were the tears of a child who had finally come home. I realized then that every meal I'd cooked, every scraped knee I'd bandaged, and every late night I'd spent working at my computer to provide for Zara and Nova was seen by him. It wasn't just chores, it was sacred. I had spent so long thinking that ministry was something people did in pulpits, but he showed me that when I sat with my girls and comforted them through a nightmare, I was doing his work. Every time I chose to be patient when I was exhausted, I was reflecting his light. He reached down and lifted my chin, and his touch felt like cool water on a burn. But the time of easy living is over, Chantel. The world is entering a season of great testing. I have brought you here to show you what is coming, so you can tell my children how to prepare. You must go back, and you must speak. I didn't want to go back. In that place, there was no hunger, no bills, no worry about the future. But as he spoke, I felt a sudden, sharp tug in my heart for my daughters. I saw them standing in the driveway of our ruined home, crying for their mother. Jesus smiled, and it was the most beautiful thing I have ever seen. You will see them again soon, he said. But first, look. Suddenly, the golden light around us shifted. We weren't in a heavenly room anymore. We were standing on a high, grassy hill that seemed to overlook the entire United States. I could see the lights of the cities, the long ribbons of the highways, and the quiet shadows of the forests. The air was crisp and clear. He pointed toward the horizon, and I saw a date materialize in the sky, glowing with a soft, urgent light. February 22nd, 2026. The first trial begins on February 22nd, he told me. I want you to see the heart of the people. I watched as the vision moved into the streets of a city that looked like it could be anywhere, maybe Chicago or New York. It was a Sunday morning. I saw a woman standing at an ATM. She was dressed in nice clothes, probably on her way to brunch or a store. She swiped her card, but the screen stayed blank. She tried again, her movements getting faster, more frantic. I saw her look at her phone, tapping the screen over and over, but the banking app wouldn't open. I saw a man in a grocery store at the same moment. He had a cart full of food for his family. When he went to pay, his phone wouldn't process the payment. The cashier tried the card, but the machine just buzzed with a flat, dead sound. The first darkness will not be a loss of power, but a loss of trust, Jesus explained. I watched as the digital systems that hold the world's wealth simply stopped. No one could buy, no one could sell, and the numbers people thought were safe in their banks became invisible. It wasn't a crash like the ones you read about in history books. It was a freeze. I saw a young couple sitting in their living room, staring at a computer screen that showed a balance of 0. They weren't poor. They had worked hard, saved every penny. But in a second, their security was gone. They looked at each other with a terror that made my chest tight. They had no cash in the house, no extra food in the pantry. They had trusted the system to always be there. Tell them to prepare for the great silence, he commanded. For 7 days, beginning February 22nd, the money will fail. It is a test to see if they trust in their gold or in the provider of all things. I saw people panicking, screaming at bank tellers through locked glass doors, and fighting over the last few items in a convenience store because they had no physical way to trade. The atmosphere was thick with a heavy, gray cloud of fear. It felt like the air itself had become hard to breathe. I saw people who had lived next door to each other for years suddenly turning into strangers, guarding their doorsteps with angry eyes. But then, Jesus moved my eyes to a different scene. I saw a small house in a quiet suburb. It was dark, but there was a soft, golden glow coming from the window. Inside, a group of neighbors had gathered. They weren't shouting. They were sitting around a wooden table. In the center of the table was a large bowl of apples and a few loaves of bread. An older man was reading from a physical Bible by the light of a candle. I saw them sharing what they had. A woman brought over a bag of rice she had stored away months ago. A young man offered to help chop wood for the fireplace. These are the ones who listened, Jesus whispered. They did not wait for the crisis to become kind. They used the time before the freeze to build a community of the heart. I saw visions of gas stations where the pumps were locked because the credit card systems were down. I saw long lines of cars stretching for miles, people standing in the cold, holding empty plastic jugs, hoping for a miracle. I saw the faces of businessmen in expensive suits weeping on the sidewalk because their digital portfolios had vanished into the ether. They were realizing, for the first time, that you cannot eat numbers on a screen. You cannot stay warm with a password. As I watched this, Jesus turned to me. Between now and February 22nd, there is a window of mercy. Tell them to look at their hearts. If they find pride there, they must root it out. If they find greed, they must give it away. The days leading up to the freeze are meant for the refiner's fire. It is a time for my people to purge the things that take my place. If they do not use these days to get right with me, the silence of February 22nd will be a prison instead of a sanctuary. I saw a vision of a woman sitting in her kitchen, much like I had been. She felt a sudden, strong urge to call her sister, whom she hadn't spoken to in 3 years, because of a stupid argument over money. I saw her struggle with her pride, her face twisting as she fought the internal battle. Finally, she picked up the phone. As she spoke the words, "I forgive you," I saw a dark, heavy chain fall off her shoulders and disappear. Jesus smiled. "That is the preparation I require," he said. "The food and the silver are for the body, but the forgiveness is for the soul. Without the soul being ready, the body will not have the strength to endure what is coming in May." The vision of the hill began to fade, but the weight of his words stayed with me. Jesus led me further along that grassy height, and as we walked, I felt the seasons shifting in the air. The crisp winter wind softened into the scent of damp earth and budding flowers. We were looking at the time after the freeze, the weeks following that first week of silence in February. I saw the world starting to move again. The screens at the banks flickered back to life. The apps on the phones opened up, and people saw their balances restored. I watched as a massive wave of relief washed over the country. People were laughing in the streets, hugging each other, and calling the 7-day freeze a once-in-a-lifetime technical failure. I saw news anchors on television screens sitting behind shiny desks, telling everyone that the system had been upgraded and that it was now stronger than it had ever been. They used big words to explain away the terror people had felt, trying to make it all sound like a simple mistake that would never happen again. "They are building on shifting sand, Chantel," Jesus said. His voice was sad, like a father watching his child walk toward a ledge they can't see. This period of quiet is a second mercy. It is the time for my people to take what they learned in the silence and turn it into action. But look at what they do instead. I saw a vision of a suburban shopping mall in April. It was crowded and loud. People were frantically buying things they didn't need, expensive clothes, electronics, jewelry, as if they were trying to prove to themselves that their money was still real. They were trying to bury the memory of the cold and the hunger they felt in February under a mountain of new toys. I saw a man laughing at his neighbor who was carrying bags of soil and seeds into his backyard. "The banks are fine now, Steve," the man shouted. "Stop living in the dark ages." Jesus turned to me, and his eyes were like a fire that didn't burn, but shed light on everything hidden. "They think the light has returned because the bulbs are glowing," he said. "But the true light is being extinguished in their hearts. They are choosing the comfort of the lie over the labor of the truth." Then the air turned hot and heavy. The date May 14th, 2026, appeared in the sky, burning like a coal. "The second trial is not a silence of the machines, but a silence of the harvest," he told me. I watched as the vision moved to the great shipping ports on the coasts. I saw thousands of massive metal containers sitting still. There were no cranes moving. No trucks were lined up to take the goods to the cities. In the heart of the country, I saw fields that should have been green with corn and wheat, but they were brown and cracked. The seeds hadn't been planted because the farmers couldn't get the fuel or the parts they needed during the chaos that followed the February freeze. I saw a grocery store on the morning of May 14th. It was a store I recognized, the one where I usually take Zara and Nova on Saturday mornings. The glass doors were smashed. Inside, the shelves were skeleton white. There was no bread, no milk, no canned goods. I saw a woman standing in the middle of the aisle, holding an empty basket, just staring at a shelf that used to hold baby formula. She wasn't crying. She looked hollowed out, as if her soul had left her body. "The trucks have stopped, Chantel," Jesus whispered. When the trust in the money died in February, the gears of the world began to grind to a halt. By May, the cupboards will be bare. Those who did not use the spring to plant and to store will find that their gold is nothing but heavy rocks. I saw a vision of a high-rise apartment building in a big city. It was evening. but there were no lights in the windows. I looked through the walls and saw a family sitting on the floor of their living room. They had plenty of money in their bank accounts, but there was nothing to buy. They were passing around a single jar of peanut butter, taking tiny spoonfuls to make it last. The father was looking out the window at the streets below, where shadows were moving in the darkness. People were roaming, looking for anything to eat. The thin veneer of being civilized had stripped away, leaving only the raw, sharp edge of survival. But then Jesus moved my hand, and I saw a different scene. It was a small house in a rural area, maybe just a few miles away from the city. I saw a group of about 20 people gathered in a backyard. They had turned the entire lawn into a garden. There were rows of green shoots pushing through the dirt. They had a large iron pot over a wood fire, and the smell of stew filled the air. They weren't just feeding themselves. They were filling small bowls and taking them to the fence, where people from the road were standing. I saw a man approach the fence. He looked angry and desperate, his hands clenched into fists. A young woman from the group walked up to him and handed him a bowl of soup and a thick slice of bread. As he took the warm bowl, I saw the anger leave his face. He started to shake, and then he sat down on the grass and began to eat. "This is the ministry of the table," Jesus said. "My people must become the storehouses. I am calling them to be the ones who have enough to share when the world has nothing, but they can only share what they have gathered. If they spend their time in the spring chasing the ghost of the old world, they will have nothing to offer the hungry in the summer." I saw visions of golden threads appearing between these small pockets of believers. It was like a map made of light. When a group in one town had extra blankets, I saw a thread of light stretching out to a group in another town that was cold. They didn't use phones or the internet. They just seemed to know. The Holy Spirit was moving through them like a wind, whispering the needs of the brothers and sisters across the hills. I saw a man wake up in the middle of the night and tell his wife, "We need to take the extra flour to the family on the Old Mill Road," even though he hadn't seen them in months. He went, and when he arrived, they were on their knees praying for food. "This is the true connection," Jesus said. "The world built its networks out of wire and glass, but I am building mine out of spirit and truth. In the months between May and November, this network will be the only thing that keeps the light of hope alive." I saw a vision of a false solution being offered to the people during the hunger of June and July. I saw men in uniform standing in the middle of the darkened cities, holding boxes of food. But to get the food, people had to sign a document on a digital tablet. They had to pledge their total loyalty to a new system that promised to bring the power back and fix the banks. I saw thousands of people standing in line, desperate and starving, reaching for those tablets. But I also saw some who turned away. I saw a mother look at the box of food and then look at her children. She felt a check in her spirit, a warning that was as clear as a bell. She took her children's hands and walked away from the line, back into the shadows. Jesus watched her with such pride. "She knows that man does not live by bread alone," he said. "She would rather be hungry with me than full in a cage. I will sustain her, Chantel. Just as I fed the thousands on the hillside, I will multiply the little she has." I watched as the mother walked back to her home. When she opened her pantry, there was a single bag of flour that should have been empty days ago. She reached in and pulled out enough to make a loaf of bread, and when she looked back, the bag was still just as full as it had been before. It was a miracle happening in the quiet of a dark kitchen, unseen by the world but known by heaven. Tell them, Chantel, that the time for choosing is now. They cannot wait until they are in the line for the boxes to decide who their master is. They must decide in the days of February and March. They must build their internal reserves of faith so that when the hunger comes, they are not led astray by the promise of a full stomach. The vision shifted again, and I saw the cities of the East Coast. They were like giant monuments to a world that was passing away. I saw the Great Lakes, cold and gray. The people there were struggling more than most because they were so dependent on the systems that had failed. I saw visions of people leaving the cities on foot, carrying what they could on their backs, walking toward the lights in the countryside. They were looking for the people of the book, They were looking for the ones who still knew how to pray. "You are the light of the home, Chantel," he said, bringing me back to my own life. "Your girls are watching you. If you are afraid, they will be terrified. If you are peaceful, they will be brave. Your ministry is to make your home a sanctuary where my spirit can rest. Do not worry about the great movements of nations. Worry about the lamp in your window and the bread on your table." The warmth of the hillside seemed to intensify as Jesus turned his gaze toward the final months of the year. The grass beneath our feet remained green, but in the world below, I saw the leaves turning to fire and then falling to the gray earth. The air in the vision grew heavy, vibrating with a frequency that made my soul ache. This was the vision of the final trial, the one that would finalize the transition of the world and sweep away the remains of everything man had built in his own pride. Jesus looked out toward the end of the year 2026. The American landscape below us looked like a tapestry of scars. The East was still struggling, a patchwork of darkened cities and small pockets of golden light. The West had become a fortress of strict rules and desperation. The tension in the air was like a bowstring drawn so tight it was beginning to fray. "Chantel, look at the day the world calls for its own leaders to save it," Jesus said. I saw the date materialize in the sky, glowing with a deep, solemn light. November 3rd, 2026. "The third trial will be the convergence," he explained. "It is the moment where the pride of man and the groaning of creation meet in a final shattering collision. It will be a total eclipse of the world they have built." I watched as the sun, which had been a source of warning in the earlier months, seemed to convulse. A solar flare larger than any recorded in the history of the Earth erupted from its surface. It looked like a whip of white fire stretching across the blackness of space to strike the Earth. But at that exact moment, I saw the human side of the catastrophe. Deep beneath the soil of the nation, in hidden rooms and cold bunkers, a final sequence of commands was sent by men who wanted total control. It was the final strike. Every power plant that was still humming, every substation that had been patched together since February, and every system that managed the flow of life was destroyed or disabled. At exactly the same time the flare hit, the human hand pulled the plug. For 3 days and 3 nights, Jesus explained, from the frozen peaks of the north to the heat of the south, there will be no power anywhere. The silence will be absolute. I saw a vision of the great highways, like I-71 and I-70 near my home in Ohio. They were packed with vehicles that had died instantly as the dual strike of the solar fire and the electronic kill switch fried every modern engine. Because it was November 3rd, the cold was already beginning to bite. I saw a mother in a stalled SUV in the middle of a mountain pass, trying to wrap her children in the floor mats of the car because the heaters had failed and the temperature was dropping toward 0. There was no way to call for help. The towers were silent. The world had become a vast, cold wilderness. I saw visions of the major airports. Thousands of people were stranded in terminals where the giant glass walls allowed the heat to escape, leaving them trapped in refrigerators of their own making. They sat on their luggage, staring at their dead phones, waiting for an announcement that would never come. "The death toll from this third trial will be millions of people," Jesus said. His voice wasn't cold. It was the voice of a father watching a house fire he had warned his children about for years. Most will not die from the strike itself, but from the complete failure of everything they trust. There will be no trucks moving, no food coming, no water flowing. The pumps that bring water to the cities will be dead. I saw a vision of Chicago. The wind was howling off the lake, a bitter, killing gale. I saw thousands of people in high-rise apartments. Without the pumps, the toilets wouldn't flush. Without the furnaces, the buildings became ice boxes. I saw people trying to start fires on their floors just to stay alive, leading to massive blazes that turned blocks of the city into charcoal. There were no fire departments to respond because the trucks wouldn't start and the water wouldn't flow. But then, Jesus touched my eyes again. "Look at the remnant, Chantel. Look at those who have kept their lamps filled with the oil of the Spirit." I saw a small community in the hills. It was the same group I had seen before, but now I saw the spiritual side of their survival. There was a hedge of golden light around the entire town. I saw an old man standing at the edge of a frozen field. He was holding a physical Bible, and he was praying with a steady, quiet breath. I saw a spiritual barrier that seemed to deflect the freezing wind, creating a pocket of calm within the borders of their community. Inside the town, things were moving with a rhythmic, old-world grace. I saw men working together to grind grain by hand. I saw a communal kitchen where women were baking bread in large brick ovens heated by wood. They were singing hymns, and the sound of their voices didn't just fill the room. It provided a physical warmth that shielded them from the despair outside. They are not just surviving, Chantel, Jesus said. They are thriving because they have returned to the order of the garden. They depend on the soil I gave them and the spirit I breathed into them. They do not fear the November wind because they have already survived the February freeze and the May hunger. He showed me a vision of healing. I saw a young man in that town who had been badly injured. There were no hospitals left, no machines to help him. I watched as the elders of the community gathered around him. They didn't look panicked. They laid hands on him and prayed with a ferocity I have never seen. I watched as the injury vanished under their hands. When the false lights of man's knowledge fail, Jesus told me, the true light of the healer will return to my people. But they must have the faith to ask. They must have spent the year 2026 learning the sound of my voice. I saw children in these communities memorizing entire books of the Bible. I saw a young girl stand by a fireplace and recite the words of the gospel from heart. As she spoke, the words seemed to hang in the air like golden embers, providing more comfort than the fire itself. This is the restoration, Jesus said. The darkness is the womb of the new world. He then gave me the detailed instructions for the timeline of preparations, emphasizing that the window is closing even as I speak to you today. Tell them the physical preparations must be matched by the purging of the heart, he said. By the time they reach the days leading up to February 22nd, they must have already begun their stores. But the work of the heart is the most important. I saw a vision of a man during the week of February. He had a basement full of food, but he had a heart full of hatred for his brother. I saw the food in his basement beginning to spoil and turn to ash, even though it was sealed tight. His spirit is attracting the darkness, Jesus warned. No amount of preparation can save a man who refuses to forgive. He showed me the timeline again, clear and unmistakable, so I could write it down for you. February 13th, 2026. Today is the final warning, the week of decision. February 22nd, 2026, the first darkness, the week of silence where the money fails. May 14th, 2026, the second darkness. The hunger begins as the systems of man fail to restart. November 3rd, 2026, the third darkness, the total collapse. Chantel, Jesus said, looking at me with a gaze that felt like it was stitching my soul back together. The world will tell you that you are a madwoman. They will point to the systems coming back online after February as proof that you were wrong. They will laugh at you in April, but you must remain steadfast. My sheep will hear my voice in your words. I saw a final vision of the year 2028. The sky was bluer than I'd ever seen it, scrubbed clean. The massive cities were quiet, reclaimed by the grass, but the countryside was dotted with villages that looked full of life. I saw people working together in the fields. I saw a society where there was no more loneliness because people were too busy loving their neighbors and walking with their Creator. The darkness is not the end of the story, Jesus said. His voice echoed as the vision began to pull away. It is the beginning of the greatest spiritual awakening in human history. Those who prepare and endure will see my glory in ways that people living in comfortable times never could. I felt that pulling sensation again, stronger this time, dragging me back toward the weight of my physical body. Lord, what if they don't believe me? I asked. Jesus smiled with infinite love. Chantel, you're not responsible for convincing anyone. You're only responsible for delivering the message faithfully. I'll make sure it reaches those who are meant to hear it. But remember this, you are never alone. I am with you always. The next thing I knew, I was gasping for air in a hospital bed, machines beeping frantically around me. My sister was there, looking like she'd aged years in a single afternoon. A nurse was checking my vitals with an expression of pure amazement. Chantel, oh my God, you're awake! My sister cried, tears streaming down her face. You've been gone for hours. The doctors said the smoke inhalation and the blast, they said there was no way. The doctor who rushed in couldn't explain what he was seeing. Miss Brown, he said, studying my chart with confusion. By every medical standard, the trauma to your lungs and the time your heart was stopped. You shouldn't be speaking to me. I've been practicing medicine for 30 years, and I've never seen a recovery like this. But I wasn't the same person who had stood in that kitchen on February 9th. I healed impossibly fast over the following days. In my soul, I was completely transformed because I had seen the future and had been given a mission. I've spent every day since then preparing my home and writing this down. I am sitting here on February 13th, 2026, and I am telling you that the window is closing. The first darkness is only 9 days away. If you're reading this right now, you have felt the stirring in your own spirit. You know things are fragile. Here's what you need to do. If you haven't stored food, start today. Do not wait for the screens to go blank on February 22nd. If you have bitterness in your heart, let it go now. Build your community. Find the other threads of light in your neighborhood. The choice is yours. You can dismiss this as the ramblings of a woman who went through a terrible accident. You can explain away my recovery as a lucky break. You can ignore the dates I have given you, or you can consider the possibility that the God who loves you is trying to prepare you for what's ahead, that he's giving you a warning, not to terrify you, but to save you, that he's calling you to be part of a remnant that will not just survive the coming storms, but will serve others through them and emerge stronger on the other side. My name is Chantel Brown. I died and met Jesus Christ face to face. He sent me back with a warning and a timeline. The trials begin on February 22nd, 2026. Between now and November, many will be lost because they refuse to listen, but millions more will find Jesus, build real community, and become part of the greatest revival in history. The choice is yours, and time is running out. What will you choose? We deeply thank you for staying with us until the very end. If you're still here, it means this testimony has touched something profound within your heart. Now we invite you to take a step that seems simple, yet can change everything. Write your city or country in the comments so we can lift your nation in prayer. Subscribe and activate the bell to receive our daily revelations, and share this message with at least 3 people you love, because even one single share can bring a lost soul back into God's embrace.